The following transmission is an Utterly Nonsense podcast exclusive presentation.
Oh, excuse me. We've been gone a while. Not specifically because of anything in particular, just because we kept trying to come up with topics, and we're like, can we talk about this? Well, I don't really know too much about that. Can we talk about this? Well, I don't really know too much. Let's just go to sleep, and, anyway, we're back.
Okay, so it is Wednesday, the first Wednesday of September. We are the Utterly Nonsense podcast.
Where we sometimes know what we're talking about.
But usually don't. So, before we start, wherever you're watching this or listening to this, whether it be YouTube, SoundCloud, iTunes, etc., we do have a number of social media platforms and platforms where we release this podcast. So, if you're listening to us on any of those platforms, please check us out elsewhere. Really, any view helps. So, without further ado, this is Utterly Nonsense. Cue that 8-bit intro. The main focus we have tonight, and you would know a lot more about this than I would, is the whole Black Label for DC Comics.
Right, so we know with the New 52, which was the reboot that started in 2011, DC was trying to maintain this very strict continuity among all of its titles, so they were trying to keep every single issue of each thing they were printing kind of in the same time frame. And then with Rebirth, they said, the hell with that, let's just tell some good stories. But since they still have a canon universe, they still have these stipulations they have to write within. So Black Label is for stories for any writer to just go outside the canon and tell whatever story they want. So it's just, standalone Batman stories or Superman, whatever. And I think that's a very good idea to kind of give non-canon things their own label.
Yeah, I mean, I fully have to agree. I think that probably will help to clear up some aspects of the DC storyline. It would have helped back in the 90s when Alan Moore was writing Killing Joke or stuff like that. But,
yeah.
I mean, I can't really see much of a flaw with that. Like, I think it does give artists, authors, whoever's working on these comics, the freedom to sort of break away from Rebirth. I mean, the one DC storyline I've been following right now is Doomsday Clock, which is so heavily intertwined with Rebirth, which is a great thing. It makes for an interesting, wider universe that this story applies to. But at the same time, I'd be screwed if I missed any one of these issues.
Right.
So, just the fact that there are more standalone stories, the fact that standalone stories exist outside of this continuity is, I think, great for the casual comics reader. It's definitely going to help to keep the medium alive.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And so far they have a few things. I don't know if you heard of, I think it was called Batman White Knight, where it's about the Joker somehow cures himself and becomes a good guy, and Batman gets thrown in Arkham. Did you hear about that?
I have not. That sounds actually pretty cool, though.
Yeah, I think I looked at a summary of it, and it was semi-interesting. But that will be the first thing to be printed in a collected edition in the Black Label, and then they have Batman Damned, which is, I think, it says that the premise of the story is the Joker's dead, and you're to assume that Batman did it, and he's damned to hell for some reason, so who shows up but the Hellblazer himself? Good old Johnny Constantine. So that sounds interesting. And then it says Superman Year One, out in November, and something else called History of the DC Universe in December of this year. And the biggest thing, I think, and this will lead into something you wanted to talk about, was the Three Jokers storyline is also going to be under the Black Label. Now, Here, I think you know about it. So describe what is this three Jokers idea?
Okay, so I mean, you probably followed the actual storyline closer than I would have, but essentially, I think was that still in the New 52? No, that had to have been in Rebirth, right?
Probably.
Essentially, Batman gains access to a source of unlimited information. And again, I didn't read the actual storyline. I've really just seen this described in YouTube videos and thought the concept was cool. But the general idea is he sits in this Mobius chair, which gives him the ability to sort of ask any question and get an entirely accurate response. And, the chair somehow provides him with visions or whatever. But so, he asks and tries to debunk what's considered to be the biggest mystery in the Batman mythos. Who is the Joker? And so the answer the Mobius chair gives is incredibly interesting. There's three Jokers.
Oh, yeah.
Existing all simultaneously. And so a lot of fans have been speculating about this because there wasn't much detail released after this. And for the most part, Rebirth has sort of avoided this. And again, I have not been following the Batman story arc all too closely. I did just pick up Batman number 50 just because it was supposed to be a landmark issue. Short answer is it's not. So
was that the wedding one where they don't have a wedding?
It was the wedding one where they both end up stepping out of the wedding for some reason, which would probably be a lot clearer if I'd read the first 49 issues. But
the reason why it's called off is because Joker says to Catwoman, "Don't you understand? If Batman is happy, then he won't be Batman, so you can't marry him and nothing can ever change."
Yeah, so, I mean, again, not a terrible issue, but so it begs the question for someone who hasn't been following the story. What came of the three Jokers? And, is that our place to question, or will it come back at some point, or is... I don't know. There's a million questions you could be asking, Yeah. The one thing that fans have been saying is it kind of helps to bridge the gap between, the Golden Age, the Silver Age, and, the modern age of comics. Because it kind of implies that the Joker went through three phases, as he did, in the history of his comic book appearances. With the Golden Age being the more Cesar Romero-esque, sort of goofy, over-the-top Joker who uses prop guns and shit like that. The second Joker being more Jack Nicholson-like, more clown-like. The third Joker being more the full-blown anarchist, the Heath Ledger. And Jared Leto apparently doesn't exist in this.
Well, I think comics-wise, the third Joker would be landmarked in the whole death of the family story.
Well, that's what I figured.
He has his own face cut off, and it's just kind of a shock horror.
So that's what
based.
Well, that's what I'm wondering. Apparently that version of the Joker is his main antagonist in Rebirth or New 52. Or again, I get the universes confused, but yeah, I mean, that's probably the creepiest version of the Joker to date.
Yeah, definitely.
So it begs a couple questions, namely, what happened to the other two Jokers while this was going on? Because it was heavily implied, in Death of the Family, that, Joker, he had not been seen in the years since he had lost his face. So, you couldn't easily be one of the other Jokers running around doing the whole Joker thing and not getting caught. And it just kind of implies that Batman hasn't been fighting them all simultaneously. One Joker isn't off committing crimes while the other Joker's fighting Batman. So it makes for a few interesting theories just from a comic perspective. But at least what I was thinking, and at least what I was getting at in regards to the DC Extended Universe, is that they might be trying to bring in this whole theory.
Yeah, because they have so many different... Well, how many movies do they have planned for Joker to be in? Let's start there.
So, I mean, that's sort of hard to get at. There's the origin film, which is directed by Todd Phillips, produced by Martin Scorsese, starring Joaquin Phoenix as the Joker in the 1980s. And, that's intended to be a sort of Killing Joke-esque origin film. which, I have mixed feelings on. I think we covered that months ago, like when they first announced it.
Yeah.
I think that was or the very first episode, like not counting number 0 of Utterly Nonsense, we actually talked about how Martin Scorsese was producing a Joker film. And I think we had originally, like, jokingly speculated that Leo DiCaprio was going to be the Joker, which would have been fun. But, I like Joaquin Phoenix, I think is legitimately one of the best actors of his generation. So, how could you possibly be pissed off about that? So that's one of them. And that's going to be interesting to see. I know, like, it was just a couple weeks ago that Alec Baldwin was cast in the role of Thomas Wayne, only to turn it down, like, less than 2 days later.
Oh, thank God. I would have done... Alec Baldwin is Thomas Wayne.
So I do like Alec Baldwin, but apparently they're trying to go for him being more like a Donald Trump-esque billionaire, which is why they cast Alec Baldwin. So
I see what they did there.
Not just a Donald Trump, but like a Biff Tannen-esque billionaire, where he's just an insanely wealthy guy and he's just sort of an ass to everyone. Mm-hmm. And, I guess...
I cannot see him as a Thomas Wayne, though. I thought Jeffrey Dean Morgan was fine. But this is for the other movie.
So, again, the official canon is saying this really doesn't take place in the main DC continuity. And
right.
At least that's what we're rolling with for now. And we'll get into this in a second, why this is important. But, so, again, there's also a number of films planned with the Jared Leto Joker, who is... the main Joker we've seen tied to the DCEU. He's the Joker from Suicide Squad.
Unfortunately.
Well, you could have mixed feelings about that. Again, we've talked about the problems with Suicide Squad in the past. I really think he gave a fine performance. It's just, first of all, you can't compare him to Heath Ledger, or else, of course, he'll fail. And it was just edited to hell. Which is a major problem. Like, his performance was decent, but the way it was put on screen was the problem, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, personally, I always compare all the Joker performances to good old Jack Nicholson.
Yeah. Well, as far as I'm concerned, Nicholson was a distant second behind Heath Ledger. Not to say he gave a particularly bad performance. I will say, I was never a huge fan of the Tim Burton films. They're great movies. It's just I don't have the same emotional connection I had to the Nolan films. And
you know why I do? Because I used to watch Batman the Animated Series, which largely was influenced stylistically by the Tim Burton movies.
Yeah, I mean,
they even got Danny Elfman to do the theme.
Well, I mean, that's as good of a reason as any. Again, animated series I didn't watch until, like, high school, which admittedly was late for that. I probably should have watched it a lot sooner, but, again, I just never had that sort of emotional connection, so I can't really compare it. And, I've had a couple additional theories about the whole Jared Leto Joker based on what we've seen in BVS and Suicide Squad, which, again, I'll get into in a second. Actually, now is a pretty good time to get into my whole theory. So, what I'm thinking, and I haven't heard anyone sort of say this, but it seems pretty obvious to me. And again, there's a few more Joker films, but they all sort of involve the same Jared Leto Joker, so it seems unimportant to cover it. Some of those include a Suicide Squad sequel, some of those include Harley Quinn spinoff, a Birds of Prey film, which is supposed to center on him.
Oh my goodness.
So there's a lot there. They apparently don't want Jared Leto's Joker to go anywhere, which leads me to my theory. Well, first of all, we've thrown out the idea, and I think David Ayer sort of denies this, but here's what I'm thinking, and I'd love to see them flesh this out. I think this is the direction they were originally going in. Jason Todd, we know, is already dead in the Batman universe, or in Batman v Superman. We see his suit. It says, "Joke's on you." It's heavily implied that the Joker and Harley Quinn killed him.
Yeah,
and it comes down to like there's a file in Suicide Squad where Harley Quinn was wanted for the murder of Robin.
Oh, really? I did not catch that.
Yeah, it's a minor detail, and unless you've seen it multiple times or know what to look for, you're not going to see it. But when they're introducing the character, it's on her personnel file. So here's
could also be Tim Drake.
Yeah, well,
in Return of the Joker, that whole storyline.
Yeah, I know, but I think a lot of people sort of connected it to the whole Red Hood storyline with Jason Todd. He's the most famously dead Robin. So, so what I'm thinking is, like the Joker we're seeing, the Jared Leto Joker, isn't the real original Joker. He's one of the three Jokers, and this is how they're bringing the three Jokers in the DC extended universe. I'm thinking he might be Jason Todd, that he was so psychologically damaged, so tortured to the point that he sort of emulated his captor. It's like the ultimate form of Stockholm Syndrome.
Actually, you know what? That's almost really like the storyline in Batman Beyond Return of the Joker.
Return of the Joker. That's exactly what it is. And
yeah.
So it makes sense. Like, DC's done it before, they could do it again. They know it's a compelling story. There's a lot that could be drawn onto that. And the Batman solo film, like the Matt Reeves, or if he's still behind it, solo film could focus on that whole relationship. It would explain why there's also currently no Robin in the DCU. Like, Batman was so... Like, that could you imagine if he knew that the Joker was Jason Todd? Like, how traumatic that would be, that he would never want to train another Robin just because that's so much worse than him just dying, you know? And again, like, the general public might not know the difference. The reason that they might be charged with the death of Robin is because he's ceased to exist when he became the Joker, and the public just assumed that he died, that there was no body, so he must be gone. So, you know, that also implies that there was a Joker originally who caused Jason Todd to become that character. And whether that's a retired version, aka the Joaquin Phoenix version, or what, is up to the user, or up to the individual.
I would definitely accept something like that, where if they had some kind of scene in a future movie where you see, you know, Jared Leto's damaged tattooed Joker, he kind of comes into some shady area, or he just gets off doing some kind of heist or something, or killing someone, and Harley is there, and then you just start hearing a slow clap, and out of the shadows you see a almost familiar figure walking, and it has the long trench coat and the fedora, and it has the long pointy nose, and it's the classic Joker we all were missing.
Well, so...
Hello, Gotham!
At least what I'm thinking is... I sort of implied that Joaquin Phoenix is just like the past Joker that caused that to happen. I don't think that. I think that it's an entirely different Joker that we have not seen on screen, that has not been rumored at, and that Joaquin Phoenix might take place in a like entirely separate universe from the DCU, but through, you know, the magic of comic book logic, he's just going to be brought in somehow, causing that whole third Joker conundrum. At least that's what I'm speculating right now, and that's
maybe he'll be brought in by Dr. Manhattan.
Yeah, well, you never know. I mean, you know, Watchmen was sort of under that whole Zack Snyder umbrella. Doomsday Clock sort of makes the whole possibility of Watchmen existing in the main DC continuity. So, you know, I'd actually love to see Watchmen in the DCU. Maybe not like get a whole full-blown movie, since the last one was pretty recent, but you know, I'd be interested to see like Dr. Manhattan as the god of DC.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, that's really all I have to say about the whole three Jokers conundrum. It's, again, pretty early on in the whole speculation for the whole thing. I think that whole theory will become a little more fleshed out once we see Joaquin Phoenix's performance. And once, you know, we see more of Jason Todd, or, you know, Jared Leto's Joker. You know, I almost said Jason Todd there. So, I mean, that's all I really have to say about the DC Extended Universe at this point. Like, you know, I'm thrilled for what we've seen of the future. I just really hope they flesh out like that whole storyline, you know?
Yeah, if they get that far. I think it's all going to hinge on the next batch of movies coming out next year.
Yeah, well, at least from what I can tell, and, you know, this is a little off topic, but I feel like it needs to be said. Aquaman and Shazam both look fantastic. Just based off of what we've seen from the initial trailers, I really don't think they'll disappoint anyone, you know?
You know, well, I watched the trailers, and they didn't make me immediately want to just go to sleep or hit myself with a frying pan, so that's a good sign.
Yeah, well, Aquaman took me a couple watchings to really get behind, but Shazam just sort of caught me right away. Just seemed like a different kind of superhero movie, which, when it comes down to it, that's what attracts viewers, you know? You want something unique. You don't want to do the same thing that everyone else is doing.
Exactly. So
that's all I really have to say about the DC Extended Universe. That's all I really have to say about the three Jokers. I just think that it'd be a nice way to bring that whole theory into the DC Extended Universe. It'd be really good fan service. We know how big the DCU is on fan service, so...
I'll tell you what, call up Warner Brothers and give them a clue. Tell them, look, you don't know what you're doing, I gotta tell you what you do. Otherwise, you're gonna screw it up again. And we don't want that, do you? Other than Black Label, there's also another older label that most people probably don't know about because they're not as big as experts as we are, of course, is DC's Milestone label. Now, Milestone, for those who don't know, I'm not going to even say when it started because I'll just get the date wrong, but I knew it was a thing in the 90s at some point where it was mainly a venue for writers to create all of these different kind of minority characters. So, you had black ones, you had Hispanic characters, kind of like what Marvel was trying to do now, except instead of forcing it on the main continuities, they had their own entire label for it where the characters can stand on their own and take the test and see if they would catch on.
It seems like sort of a gray area. Like, based on what you're describing, it sort of sounds like a separate but equal ideology.
Well, the thing is that they're allowed to, be written into their entirely own continuity and not have to follow all the rules of this other established brand. Or not have to take on the name of another character.
I don't know. It seems morally like sort of... Or morally is not the right word. It seems sort of like a gray area from, like, a modern standpoint. It seems like it could piss off people if they did it wrong. It's one thing for it to be a testing ground, but, for it to be a testing ground specifically based on the race of the characters just seems, like, kind of racist,
Well, here's why I bring it up, because some good can come of it, and some good did come of it. Because Milestone was home to what became a fan favorite character, Static, from Static Shock.
Okay.
Which, as some people might know, was a popular cartoon on Kids WWWB back in the early 2000s. And the creator of Static and Milestone, Dwayne McDuffie, also went on to become one of the main writers and producers for the cartoon, and then Justice League and Justice League Unlimited.
Right.
So...
Okay, yeah, so some good did come out of it.
So Static, of course, was brought over into not only the DC animated universe, but the main DC universe, because he had his own title for the New 52, which didn't last, but that was like a discrepancy with the writers. There was all these creative differences. So the point I'm getting to is that Static Shock, along with the Milestone brand, are coming back later this year, along with... DC Black Label. So they got two new things coming at you with different stories, and hopefully they'll get a longer running Static series, which I might just buy. Because I love the character. I've actually been rewatching the cartoon.
Right.
And I read on, it says like Wikipedia, whatever, that he was intended to be like DC's Spider-Man, and he really is. He's always making wisecracks, and he's like the guy in high school. And I don't know. I just think he's great, because if you watch all the shows closely, he jobs the least amount of all of them, and it's really weird. Because especially Superman, they tend to just take hits from something that it's like, he could just run around that, or he could just use his brain for half a second. Static, he uses his brain most of the time.
Okay.
So I commend him for that.
Yeah,
so.
It's a nice touch. The thing I will say, first of all, like, as soon as DC Universe comes out, which I think from the time we're recording this is only like a week and a half away, so that's something to look forward to. See Young Justice. I don't know if the new season's coming right away or if we're gonna have to wait a few months, but so Static does actually make an appearance in the second season, and it's sort of implied that he's gonna have a more major role in the third season. Which of course I was a Static Shock fan growing up.
You know what? That kind of fulfills this prophecy. Because I just saw this episode where he's on a case with Batman. Static asks him, "So where's Robin?" "He's with the Titans." "The who?" "You'll meet them someday." The day has come.
Well, we'll see if when they eventually reboot Teen Titans that, they actually bring him into it. That's another actually interesting thing that if people are into it, I think that'd be a great topic of discussion in a couple weeks. Like, once Titans comes out, how it compares to the other two Teen Titans series. Which I think we already have a good idea of where it would rank. But I do want to see it more out of sheer curiosity than anything else.
Yeah. But you see, you're saying it's kind of we're saying that it's kind of a gray area to start a character off in something else. But see, if you have one thing that stands on its own and it's good, it can take off. And now I think most likely more people will know who Static Shock is than Black Lightning, who was your actual resident Lightning black guy in DC.
Right.
And who knows, more people might know him eventually because he has his own live-action TV show now.
Yeah, no, I think he's definitely developed more name recognition over the years, even if his name is sort of, it's sort of reminiscent of, like, blaxploitation. He's, like, the blaxploitation superhero, but,
Well, like the like Luke Cage is to Marvel.
Yeah, basically. It's like, that era of 1970s cinema that sort of focused on, like, just making black people their own sort of stars while also just being incredibly racist in the process. And for whatever reason, no one seems to call like that era of cinema out. Yeah, so again, another thing in Young Justice, like Black Lightning has a small role in it, like smaller than Static, but at like the end of the second season, he like meets up with Static and he's like, hey, if you ever need a mentor, hit me up.
That's cool.
Yeah, no, it's like a really nice touch, and I think people were sort of making that connection. So, again, I really hope they play off this because there's going to be apparently another pretty massive time jump. But in other words, just watch Young Justice because it's legitimately one of the best DC cartoons really ever. But produced at least within the last decade. So, yeah, check it out.
And they're putting all the seasons on their own Netflix now, right? Is that open yet?
Again, week and a half, something like that. DC Universe, yeah. So, again, as that approaches, I think we'll talk a little more about that. Without further ado...
Fuck Batman! Oh, wait, no, we did that already.
This has been the Utterly Nonsense Podcast. As I said in the beginning of this episode, you can check us out on YouTube, SoundCloud, iTunes, a number of other podcasting platforms. Chances are, if you're on one of those other platforms aside from Spotify, you can find us.
Yeah, Spotify, what the heck?
Yeah, like we've seriously been waiting.
Like our things.
It's been a few months. Like it's been at least a couple months since we submitted the podcast to Spotify, and they still have not gotten back to us. But God,
they're working on it.
Yeah,
patience.
It's almost like they don't want a free podcast on their platform.
I know, right? Yeah. We have so many viewers to bring to them.
Yeah.
So many dedicated, loyal, great viewers.
No, instead they just went with Amy Schumer. Okay, so without further ado, I'm CJ DeLeo, joined as always alongside John Kaggs.
Of course.
This has been the Utterly Nonsense Podcast, where it's not news, it's nonsense.
I put a shock to your system.